The pipe burst at exactly the wrong moment, which is to say, the moment Emīlija's mother called. "You're still coming to Mārtiņi at the cottage, yes?" Mara's voice crackled through the phone as icy water sprayed across Emīlija's carefully restored kitchen floor. "And you're bringing someone this year? Please tell me you're bringing someone." Emīlija stared at the geyser erupting beneath her grandmother's antique sink, watching 3 months of renovation work flood away in real time. This was what happened when you tried to preserve a 19th-century farmhouse with 21st-century plumbing expectations. "I'll see what I can do," she muttered, already reaching for the towels she kept stacked precisely for these disasters. Because of course there would be disasters. There were always disasters when you insisted on doing everything yourself. Her mother sighed that particular sigh, the one that conveyed decades of disappointment in a single exhalation. "Emīlija, Mila, you can't keep showing up alone. People talk. Your aunts ask questions. And you know how your grandmother would have wanted. I have to go. There's water everywhere." She ended the call before Mara could deploy the guilt about grandmother's wishes, grandmother's cottage, grandmother's dreams of great-grandchildren running through these very rooms that were currently flooding. Emīlija dropped to her knees, wrenching the valve shut with hands that had grown surprisingly capable over the past year. Architecture school taught you to design beautiful spaces. Restoring your inheritance while running your own firm taught you to fix them when they fell apart at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. The water slowed to a dribble. The silence felt accusatory. She pulled out her phone and opened the app everyone in Riga couldn't stop talking about. Husband for an hour. The concept was absurd. Men offering domestic services through a platform that treated household skills like ride-sharing. Need someone to assemble furniture? Unclog a drain? Pretend to be your boyfriend at a wedding? There was probably someone willing to do it for the right price. But every actual craftsman she called about the cottage wanted 3 months' notice or charged fees that made her architect's salary look like pocket money. And Mārtiņi was in 2 weeks. She filtered for plumbing, carpentry, available immediately. One profile made her pause. Roberts, 34. Certified in plumbing, electrical, carpentry. Available for projects large and small. Respectful, efficient, discreet. The photo showed only his hands, capable hands holding a wrench against weathered wood. No face. No social media links. The reviews were strangely intense. Exceptional work. True craftsman. Changed my life. Who writes, "Changed my life," about a plumber? She booked him anyway. The pipes wouldn't fix themselves, and apparently neither would her life. Roberts arrived precisely on time, which should have been the first clue that something was off. Emīlija had spent the morning in a panic, clearing debris from the last failed repair attempt, hiding the empty coffee cups that testified to 3 sleepless nights trying to make the cottage look like a restoration project rather than a disaster zone. The place was her inheritance, her portfolio piece, her proof that she could honor tradition while carving out something entirely her own. It was also, currently, a monument to her hubris. The truck that pulled up the gravel drive was too nice. Not ostentatious, but well-maintained, expensive in that understated way that suggested the owner actually valued quality. She watched from the window as a man stepped out. Tall, dark hair, wearing work clothes that had actually seen work. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what his hands could do. She opened the door before he could knock. "Emīlija!" His voice was deep, accented with the particular inflection of someone who'd grown up speaking Latvian in the countryside, not the clipped urban rhythm of Riga. "I'm Roberts." Up close, he was unfairly handsome. The kind of handsome that probably made clients awkward and inconvenient. She forced herself into professional mode. "The burst pipe is in the kitchen. I managed to shut off the water, but there's damage to the flooring, and I think the joining to the main line is." "Let me look." He moved past her with the ease of someone who'd navigated 100 old houses, his gaze cataloging details she'd stopped seeing months ago. Within 30 seconds of examining the pipe, he'd identified the problem, retrieved tools from a kit that looked like it cost more than her car, and begun repairs with an efficiency that felt almost aggressive. "You're using modern fixtures on heritage plumbing," he said, not looking up. The pressure differential will keep causing failures. I know that now. The beam above your head is rotting from moisture exposure. Your electrical panel is outdated by about 40 years. And someone installed your windows backwards. They're leaking cold air directly into the wall cavities. Emīlija stared at him. I hired you to fix a pipe. The pipe is fixed. He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. But if you're trying to restore this place properly, those other issues will destroy everything you've done here. Beautiful work, by the way. The floor restoration is exceptional. The compliment caught her off guard. She'd been braced for judgment, not recognition. How much would it cost to fix everything? He quoted a number that made her laugh, until she realized he wasn't joking. That's impossible. I've gotten estimates 3 times that amount. I don't have overhead costs. And I like the work. His eyes met hers, direct and unreadable. I can start tomorrow. 2 weeks should cover it if you're willing. Why are you doing this through an app? You could be running your own company. Something shifted in his expression, not quite evasion, but close. I have my reasons. Do you want the help or not? She should have asked more questions. Should have demanded references, credentials, explanations for why someone this skilled was available immediately at rates that made no economic sense. Instead, she heard herself say yes. Good. One condition, though. He paused at the door, silhouetted against the autumn light. No questions about my life outside this property. I'm here to work. That's all. The door closed behind him before she could decide if that was a reasonable boundary or a massive red flag. Probably both, she thought, staring at the perfectly repaired pipe that had taken him less than 10 minutes to fix. Definitely both. Roberts worked like he'd been born in old houses, instinctively reading the building's history through warped wood and settled foundations. Emīlija tried to focus on her laptop, reviewing architectural drawings for a client project, but kept finding reasons to check on his progress. You're hovering, he said without looking up from the beam he was inspecting. I'm supervising. You're distracting. But there was amusement in his voice. She should have retreated to her makeshift office upstairs. Instead, she watched him mark measurements with a precision that suggested years of practice. When he pulled out a hand plane, an actual vintage tool, not the cheap modern versions, she couldn't help herself. Where did you learn to use that? My grandfather. He'd disown me if I used power tools for finished work. He glanced up. Want to try? 20 minutes later, her hands were positioned over his on the plane, his breath warm against her neck as he guided her through the motion. Feel how the grain wants to go. You work with it, not against it. She felt it. She also felt the alarming acceleration of her pulse. The sound of tires on gravel shattered the moment. Emīlija. Her mother's voice preceded her through the door by several seconds. Why didn't you tell me you were at the cottage? I brought your aunts to see the... Oh. Mara stopped dead, staring at Roberts with the expression of a hunter spotting rare game. Mama, this is Roberts. He's a handyman I hired to. Your boyfriend. Mara's face transformed into pure delight. Finally, you bring someone to meet us. No, he's not. But Roberts was already stepping forward, extending his hand with a warm smile that Emīlija had not yet seen directed at her. It's a pleasure to meet you, Kunza. Emīlija has told me so much about her family. Emīlija stared at him. What was he doing? Her mother beamed. The ants materialized from the doorway, circling like well-dressed sharks. Within minutes, they were all seated around the cottage's restored table, the one piece Emīlija had actually completed successfully, with tea and paprikakas that Mara had, of course, brought. So, Roberts, what do you do? Anders leaned forward with predatory interest. I work with my hands. Restoration, traditional crafts. My grandfather taught me that good work honors those who came before. The ants practically melted. Emīlija kicked him under the table. He didn't flinch. And you understand our traditions. You'll come to Mārtiņi. Mara's eyes were bright with hope. I'd be honored. Emīlija mentioned you make the best Sklandrowsi in Vidzeme. She told you that? Mara looked at her daughter with such genuine happiness that Emīlija felt her protests die in her throat. When had she ever made her mother look that pleased? The visit stretched for an hour, Roberts charming them with stories about learning folk songs from his grandfather, discussing the proper way to prepare for winter solstice, asking thoughtful questions about family recipes. He fit into their world with an ease that Emīlija, who'd spent years studying abroad and building her career in Riga, had somehow lost. After they left, with Mara extracting promises about Mārtiņi and giving Emīlija a significant look that communicated volumes, an awkward silence filled the cottage. "I'm sorry," Robert said finally. "You looked mortified, and I thought, why did you do that?" "Because your mother's face when she thought you were alone again. I know that look, the one that says they worry you're choosing work over happiness." He shrugged. "Seemed easier to just play along. For 2 weeks. You think we can maintain that for 2 weeks?" He considered this. "I'll make you a deal. I'll play boyfriend at family events if you stop micromanaging my work. You keep hovering because you don't trust me. Or," his eyes held hers, "because you're attracted to me and it's making you uncomfortable." Heat flooded her face. "I'm not. So we have a deal." She should have said no. Should have called her mother right then and confessed the truth. "Fine," she heard herself say. "But this is purely transactional." "Of course," he agreed, returning to his work with a smile that suggested he didn't believe her at all. Neither did she. The days developed a rhythm that felt dangerously like domesticity. Mornings meant coffee shared in companionable silence while Roberts explained the day's work. "We need to get our story straight," Emīlija said on the third day, watching him measure wood for window repairs. "How did we meet?" "Through work," he said easily. "You needed help with a restoration project. I was available. We spent time together, discovered we had chemistry." He looked up with a slight smile. "Not entirely untrue. We need details. My aunts will interrogate us." So they rehearsed while working, creating a fiction that felt uncomfortably close to reality. He taught her to use chisels properly while explaining how he'd supposedly asked her to dinner after fixing her apartment's electrical panel. She held beams steady while inventing their first kiss, which he'd allegedly initiated after she'd complimented his craftsmanship. "You're good at this," she said, watching him fit a window frame with perfect precision. "At lying. At making things beautiful." Something shifted in his expression. Vulnerability quickly shuddered. "My grandfather used to say that honest work is prayer. You're honoring something, making it whole again." They were working in close quarters now, the cottage's narrow spaces forcing proximity. His shoulder brushed hers. Neither moved away. That night, over soup she'd made and bread he'd brought from a bakery in Cesis, she told him about her father. How he'd left when she was 12, how her mother had rebuilt their lives through sheer determination, how Emīlija had learned that depending on people meant inevitable disappointment. "So you prove you don't need anyone," Robert said quietly. "Is that so wrong?" "No. Just lonely." He shared his own carefully edited truths. A grandfather who taught him that working with your hands connected you to generations of knowledge, an office job that paid well but left him hollow, a need to escape into something real. "What kind of office job?" she asked. "The soul-crushing kind." He deflected with humor, but she noticed he never actually answered. The almost kiss happened while measuring the repaired windows. She was on a ladder, he was steadying it, and when she looked down their faces were suddenly inches apart. She saw him start to lean in, saw herself mirror the movement, felt the world narrow to the space between them. His phone buzzed. The moment shattered. He stepped back, checking the message with a frown that suggested serious complications elsewhere. She pretended not to notice. The next day, they visited Cesis Market for supplies. The vendor selling wool blankets greeted them as a couple, making assumptions about their shared life. Roberts played along, his hand finding the small of her back with casual possession. It should have felt false. It didn't. Walking back, bags of vegetables and fresh bread between them, she felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. This wasn't the plan. The plan was transactional, his labor for her family's satisfaction, a clean exchange. but watching him joke with elderly craftsmen in the market, seeing how he evaluated handmade goods with a connoisseur's eye, noticing the expensive tools he casually pulled from his truck, none of it made sense for a handyman working gig jobs. "Roberts," she started. "Why are you really?" Her phone rang. Her mother, breathless with excitement. "The whole family wants to come to Mārtiņi. Your cousins from Liepāja, Uncle Janice, everyone. They're so excited to meet Roberts. This will be wonderful, Mila. The cottage will finally be full of life again, just like your grandmother wanted." Emīlija looked at Roberts, who was watching her with those unreadable eyes. "That's great, Mama," she managed. When she hung up, the weight of their pretense settled between them. 30 people, she said. "We'll have to convince 30 people we're in love. Is that what we're doing?" His voice was soft. "Convincing them?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because she was no longer sure what was real and what was performance, and that terrified her more than any crumbling foundation. 1 week until Mārtiņi, and the cottage had transformed from disaster to dream. But Emīlija's internal landscape was far less organized. "We need to practice the traditions," Robert said over breakfast. "Your family will expect us to participate. Songs, dances, the feast preparations. I barely remember the songs. Then I'll teach you." His voice when he sang was a revelation, rich and trained, with a particular ornamentation that came from years of serious folk practice. He taught her Ija Zuzu while they worked, correcting her pitch gently, showing her how harmonies were meant to interweave like the joinery he was completing on the cottage beams. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" she asked. "My grandfather. He was very involved in the tradition." Again, that careful deflection. They made sklandrosses together, his hands guiding hers through the process of working rye dough, preparing the carrot and potato filling with precisely the right spices. He knew recipes her own grandmother had used, remembered details about Mārtiņi traditions that Emīlija had forgotten or never learned. "You know more about this than I do," she admitted, frustration edging her voice. "I studied architecture in Amsterdam, built my career in Riga. Sometimes I feel like I'm caught between two worlds and don't fully belong to either." Roberts looked at her with unexpected understanding. "I know exactly what you mean. Success in one world can feel like betrayal of another. But maybe," he hesitated, "maybe the goal isn't choosing. Maybe it's integration. Is that what you're doing? Integrating. Trying to." That evening, they tried on folk costumes from her grandmother's trunk. His fit surprisingly well, as if he'd worn such clothing before. When he took her hands to demonstrate a traditional dance, teaching her the steps with patient precision, the cottage kitchen became something timeless. The kiss happened mid-spin, spontaneous, inevitable, terrifying. His mouth on hers tasted like cardamom and longing. For a moment that stretched and broke, she let herself fall into it. Then reality crashed back. She pulled away, breathless. "Practice," she said quickly. "We should practice that. For authenticity." "Right. Practice." But his eyes said something entirely different. Her mother called twice daily now with increasingly personal questions. How serious were they? What were Robert's intentions? Had Emīlija finally found someone worthy of the family name? Roberts fielded it all with diplomatic grace, but Emīlija noticed the pattern. He never discussed his work in detail, never mentioned friends or family beyond his deceased grandfather, deflected every question about the future with charm and misdirection. The village had noticed them too. The woman at the bakery congratulated Emīlija on her handsome boyfriend. The local builder asked Roberts technical questions and seemed surprised, impressed, by the depth of his knowledge. "You're known here," Emīlija said after one such encounter. "My grandfather had a reputation. People remember, but something didn't align. The expensive truck, the professional-grade tools, the way he sometimes checked his phone and his expression would shudder with stress that seemed far removed from a handyman's concerns. That night, after he'd left for his hotel in Cesis, he'd insisted on maintaining that boundary at least." Emīlija opened her laptop. She typed, "Robert's handyman Riga." Nothing. "Robert's craftsman Latvia." Nothing relevant. Roberts Restoration Latvia. The search results showed restoration companies, historical societies, craftsman collectives. No one matching his description. It was as if he didn't exist outside the walls of her cottage, as if he'd manifested specifically for this moment, this project, this impossible pretense that was becoming dangerously real. She closed the laptop, staring at the perfectly restored room around her, his work, his skill, his mysterious presence that had transformed everything. Who was Roberts? And why did the answer suddenly feel like it might break her heart? The folk festival in Cesis happened on a crystalline autumn day when the light turned everything golden. Emīlija had planned to attend as an observer, but her mother had other ideas. "You must enter the couple's competition," Mara insisted, practically pushing them toward the registration table. "Show everyone what a beautiful pair you make." Roberts looked at Emīlija with a question in his eyes. She nodded, helpless against the momentum of the moment. They chose put, Vagini, blow, winds, a traditional duet about longing and homecoming. Standing on the small stage, surrounded by people who'd grown up with these songs embedded in their bones, Emīlija felt suddenly exposed. Then Roberts began to sing. His voice transformed the village square. Rich, trained, carrying harmonies that spoke of years of serious study. When Emīlija joined him, their voices wove together with an intimacy that made her chest ache. The lyrics, about wandering far from home, about yearning for return, about finding what you didn't know you'd lost, felt like confession. They won. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, older community members swarmed Roberts. "Your grandfather would be so proud," one elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. "We remember when he sang at the song festival. You have his gift." Another man clasped his shoulder. The Lipins family always had the voice for it. Emīlija watched Roberts navigate the attention with grace tinged with discomfort. Lipins. She'd never known his last name. He'd never offered it. That night, back at the cottage with a bottle of wine and firelight dancing across newly restored walls, the truth hovered between them like smoke. "I should tell you something," Roberts began, then stopped. His phone had been buzzing all evening. He'd ignored every call. "You don't have to," Emīlija said, though she desperately wanted him to. "Whatever your past is. It's not past. It's present. It's complicated. I don't care." The words surprised her with their vehemence. "I'm falling for you, Roberts. The person you are here with me. That's what matters. I'm falling for you, too." His voice was rough. "But there are things about my life." She stopped him with a kiss, deep, deliberate, done with pretense. "I don't care about your past. I care about this. About us. About right now." What happened next felt inevitable and utterly new. His hands in her hair, her fingers tracing the muscles of his back, the way they moved together like a song finding its harmony. In her grandmother's cottage, surrounded by the work they'd done together, they built something that felt more permanent than any restoration. Afterward, tangled in sheets and firelight, she traced the line of his jaw. "Stay," she whispered. "Don't go back to the hotel tonight." "I'll stay." He pulled her closer. "I'll stay as long as you'll have me." She fell asleep believing him. Morning came too bright, too early. Robert's phone vibrated on the nightstand with relentless urgency. He reached for it, still half asleep, then froze. Emīlija, drowsy and content, glanced at the screen. The caller ID was perfectly clear. VP Operations, husband for an hour corporation. Her blood turned to ice. Robert saw her see it. The color drained from his face. Emīlija. But she was already pulling away, the warmth of the night evaporating like morning mist. VP Operations. Corporation. This wasn't a handyman who sometimes did consulting. "Who are you?" she asked, though somewhere deep down, she already knew the answer would destroy everything. His silence told her more than any words could. The phone kept ringing. Between them, the distance of inches felt like kilometers. Everything beautiful they'd built was about to crumble, and they both knew it. "It's just consulting work," Robert said, setting the phone face down on the table. "I help them with quality control sometimes. making sure the craftsmen they connect with clients are legitimate. Emīlija wanted to believe him, desperately wanted the explanation to be that simple. Consulting, she repeated. It's boring corporate stuff. Not worth discussing. He kissed her forehead, and she let herself lean into the gesture, ignoring the small voice whispering that something was fundamentally wrong. 3 days until Mārtiņi. The cottage was nearly perfect. His work had been nothing short of miraculous. But Roberts himself was unraveling. The phone never stopped. Every few hours, another call he'd step outside to take, returning with tension carved into his shoulders. He became distracted mid-conversation, distant even when physically present. The easy warmth between them developed fractures. "Is everything okay?" she asked on the second day. "Fine. Just work complications." But his eyes said otherwise. That afternoon, while she was upstairs reviewing final details for the celebration, his voice drifted through the cottage, sharp, commanding, nothing like the gentle craftsman she'd come to know. "I don't care about the board meeting. I don't care about the acquisition. Handle it without me." A pause. "Because I'm in the middle of something that actually matters." "Tell them." "No, don't tell them anything. Just handle it. Board meetings. Acquisitions." These weren't the concerns of a consultant. Her hands shook as she opened her laptop. "Husband for an hour founder." The search results loaded like a slow-motion collapse. Roberts Lee Pins, 34, appeared across multiple screens, Forbes lists, business journals, tech conference panels. The same face, refined and polished in expensive suits, standing beside politicians and investors. Latvia's tech prodigy built a billion-euro empire connecting tradition with innovation. The articles detailed his story. Grandson of a renowned folk craftsman, he created the platform after his grandfather's death, revolutionizing the gig economy by focusing on traditional skills. The company had expanded across Europe. He was worth more money than she could conceptualize, and he'd let her hire him, through his own app, as if it were all some kind of experiment. Her vision blurred. Was any of it real? The conversations by the fire, the singing, the way he touched her like she was precious. Had it all been performance? Was she just another project to him? An amusing diversion from board meetings and acquisitions? She thought of how he deflected every personal question, how he'd known too much about too many things, the expensive tools and the too nice truck, and the way older community members had recognized not just his grandfather's legacy but something more. Everyone had known except her. The humiliation was crushing. She'd opened herself to him, shared her fears about her father, about never being enough, about always having to prove her independence. And all the while, he'd been playing a role, slumming in his own grandfather's world like it was some kind of therapeutic retreat. She didn't hear him come upstairs, didn't realize he was there until his voice, soft with concern, broke through her spiral. "Emīlija, what's wrong?" She looked up from the laptop screen, tears streaming down her face. He followed her gaze to the article, and she watched comprehension, then panic, flood his expression. "Who are you?" she asked, though the evidence was glowing between them. "Who are you, really?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Every second of silence confirmed what she already knew. Nothing had been real. She'd fallen in love with a lie, and the worst part was seeing in his stricken face that he understood exactly what he'd done. "I'm the founder," Roberts said quietly, the words landing like stones in still water. "I created husband for an hour after my grandfather died. He spent his life teaching traditional crafts, watching them disappear. I wanted to preserve what he loved while building something sustainable. The app, it connects people who need help with craftsmen who have real skills. And you just take jobs yourself? For fun. To stay grounded. To remember why I built it in the first place." He stepped toward her. She stepped back. "I came here as myself, Emīlija. The craftsman, not the CEO. That's the real me. You let me hire you through your own platform." Her voice was ice over fury. "You watched me struggle with payments, with budgets, with trying to do everything myself. And you said nothing. I quoted you fair prices. Fair prices." She laughed, the sound brittle. You're a billionaire playing at being working class. This was what, exactly? A social experiment. Billionaire goes undercover to see how the other half lives. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? The tears came now, hot and furious. I told you about my father, about learning that depending on people leads to disappointment. And all the while, you were lying to my face. I never lied about how I feel. Everything was a lie. Her voice cracked. The humble handyman, the careful deflections, the mysterious past. You constructed a character, and I fell for it like an idiot. His jaw tightened. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with doing everything alone, so determined to prove you don't need anyone, you would have asked more questions. But you didn't want to know, did you? Because then you'd have to admit you needed help. The words hit like a slap. How dare you? I dare because it's true. You hired me because you were desperate, but you resented needing me every single day. You can't accept help without seeing it as failure. And you can't be honest without hiding behind personas. She was shouting now. Which version of you was real, Roberts? The CEO in the expensive suits or the craftsman in my cottage? Or are you so fragmented you don't even know anymore? The silence that followed was devastating. Let me finish the cottage, he said finally, his voice rough. Let me prove I meant every word. That us was real. I don't need you to finish anything. She forced steel into her voice. I never needed you at all. She saw the words land, saw them wound him as deeply as she'd intended. Good. Let him hurt the way she was hurting. He left without another word. Emīlija waited until his truck disappeared down the drive before she collapsed. She spent the next 18 hours trying to complete the remaining work alone. The window frame he'd been installing sat crooked, no matter how many times she adjusted it. The electrical panel he'd been upgrading sparked when she tried to connect the wires. Nothing fit. Nothing worked. Nothing made sense without him. At 3 a.m, surrounded by tools she didn't know how to use and repairs she couldn't complete, she finally broke. Great, gasping sobs that shook her entire body, grief for something that had never really been hers to lose. Her mother found her at dawn, curled on the cottage floor amid scattered tools and shattered dreams. Emīlija. Mila. Mara knelt beside her, pulling her daughter into her arms the way she hadn't since Emīlija was 12 years old. I can't do it, Emīlija whispered. I can't fix it. I can't fix any of it. I know, sweetheart. Everything's ruined. The cottage, Mārtiņi, everything. We'll figure it out. For the first time in 20 years, since the day her father left and she decided she would never need anyone again, Emīlija heard herself say the words she'd sworn she never would. Mama, I need help. Her mother's arms tightened around her. I know, Mila. I'm here. Mārtiņi Day arrived with frost on the windows and acceptance heavy in Emīlija's chest. The cottage was beautiful, imperfect, but beautiful. Her mother and aunts had helped complete what they could. The rest would have to wait. The family gathered, and the questions came immediately. Where was Roberts? Would he be joining them? Emīlija stood in the center of her grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by the people who loved her most, and told the truth. He's gone. It wasn't real. I hired him to fix the cottage, and we pretended to be together to make you happy. I'm sorry I lied. The silence was crushing. Then her mother did something unexpected. She laughed softly. Mila, I knew. Emīlija stared. What? I knew it wasn't real at first. No one falls in love that quickly, that neatly. Mara touched her daughter's face. But I watched you with him. I saw something change. I just wanted you to remember that you deserve someone who truly sees you. Mama, after your father left, I taught you to be strong. To never need anyone the way I needed him. Her mother's eyes glistened. But I overcorrected. I taught you that needing people was weakness. I'm so sorry. The words Emīlija had needed for 20 years, finally spoken. The sound of vehicles interrupted the moment. Through the window, she saw trucks pulling up, Robert's truck leading several others. Her heart lurched painfully. He emerged wearing work clothes, not the expensive attire of a CEO. Behind him came other men and women, craftsmen carrying tools and supplies. The husband for an hour crew. Roberts walked to the door. Emīlija's uncle opened it, and suddenly her entire family was witnessing whatever came next. "I can't undo the lie," Roberts said, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room. "But I can finish what we started. Not as your employee, not as your pretend boyfriend. As someone who loves you and wants to build something real." Anger flared hot in her chest. "You think showing up with a crew fixes broken trust? You think I need you to rescue me?" "No." He stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "I think we need each other. And I'm finally ready to stop pretending that's weakness. You lied to me for 2 weeks." "I did. And I was wrong." His voice was steady, clear. "I built an empire, Emīlija. Made more money than I know what to do with. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. Everyone wanted the CEO, the success story, the tech prodigy. No one wanted the man who just wanted to work with his hands and sing old songs and make things beautiful." The room was silent, every family member riveted. "Then I met you," he continued, "and for the first time in 10 years, someone saw the craftsman first. You didn't know about the money or the company, and you didn't care. You cared about the work, about honoring your grandmother's legacy, about doing things right. With you, I was just Roberts, and it was the first time in a decade I felt real. So you kept lying. Because I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd never see the craftsman again. You'd only see the billionaire, and everything between us would become about that." He took a breath. "I was wrong. I should have trusted you. Should have trusted us." "You should have," she whispered. "I've taken leave from the company. My VP is handling the acquisition. I'm choosing this, you, the cottage, the life we talked about building. If you'll let me, you can't just walk away from your company." "I'm not walking away. I'm integrating. I'll still run it, but differently. From here, if you'll have me, focusing on what matters, preserving traditions, supporting craftsmen, building something meaningful." He gestured to the crew behind him. "These people, they're the heart of what I created. They deserve better than an absent founder who forgot why he started." Her mother's voice, soft but firm. "Emīlija, listen to him. He lied to me, Mama. And you've been lying to yourself for years, thinking you have to do everything alone." Mara squeezed her hand. "Maybe you both needed to learn the same lesson." Emīlija looked at Roberts, really looked at him. Saw the fear and hope warring in his eyes. Saw a man who'd built walls just like hers, who'd fragmented himself trying to be what others needed. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "Then let me earn it. One day at a time. One honest conversation at a time." He held out his hand. "Let me help finish this cottage. Not to rescue you, but because we're better together than apart." Her hand trembled as she reached for his. "One day at a time," she agreed. And surrounded by family and craftsmen, and the cottage they'd restored together, they began to build something real. Forgiveness didn't come easily or all at once. But Emīlija let Robert stay for Mārtiņi, and in the days that followed, they rebuilt more than just the cottage. They worked side by side in careful silence at first, then with tentative conversation, then with the honesty that had been missing from the beginning. He explained his vision for the company, restructuring to focus on preserving traditional crafts, creating apprenticeship programs across Europe, using his wealth to protect cultural heritage instead of just profiting from it. "I was going to ask if you'd consult on the architecture side," he said, measuring a beam with a precision she'd come to recognize as his signature. "Help design spaces that honor tradition while meeting modern needs. But that was before. I understand if you want nothing to do with." "I need time," she interrupted. "Time to trust you again. Time to figure out what this is without pretense or panic or my family watching." She paused. "But I don't want you to go." Relief flooded his face. "I can do time. I can do slow. I can do whatever you need." The Mārtiņi celebration became something neither had expected, a true gathering, with Robert's crew joining her family, craftsmen sharing techniques, while her aunts served traditional foods. The cottage glowed with warmth and completion. During the feast, Emīlija stood with a glass of wine in hand and spoke words she'd never planned. "I want to thank my mother for teaching me strength, even when I misunderstood what strength meant. I want to thank my grandmother, whose legacy gave me this place and this purpose. And I want to thank Roberts," her voice caught, "for reminding me that needing help isn't weakness, that building something beautiful requires more than one pair of hands." Her mother's eyes shone with tears. Roberts looked at her like she'd given him something precious. That night, after the guests had gone and only firelight remained, they talked until dawn. She explained that trust would return slowly, in increments, through consistent honesty. He promised transparency, patience, whatever timeline she needed. "I'm not going anywhere," he said simply. "I'll prove it every day if that's what it takes." 3 months later, winter had transformed the landscape into something crystalline and new. Emīlija sat at the cottage's restored table, sketching plans for their next project, a historic guild house in Cesis that Roberts Heritage Foundation had acquired. She was lead architect now, running her own firm with backing from his foundation at market rates. She'd insisted on that. He'd agreed without argument. Roberts stood near the fireplace, teaching a young apprentice the intricacies of traditional joinery. He split his time between Riga, where the company headquarters operated under a more distributed leadership model, and Cesis, where he could work with his hands and build the life he'd always wanted. The door opened, bringing cold air and Emīlija's mother carrying a basket of fresh bread. "Still not engaged?" Mara teased, kissing them both on the cheek. "My friends are starting to ask questions." Emīlija and Roberts exchanged a look, amused, understanding, content. "Maybe someday, Mama," Emīlija said. "But for now, this is enough." And it was more than enough. Through the cottage window, snow fell in soft curtains, blanketing the world in quiet. Inside, warm light spilled across restored wood and careful craftsmanship. A young apprentice learned skills passed down through generations. Plans for future projects spread across the table. Two people who'd learned to build a life together, not despite their complexities, but because of them, worked side by side. Roberts caught her eye across the room and smiled. Not the careful smile of a man hiding who he was, but the open expression of someone finally, fully seen. She smiled back and returned to her sketches. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, they continued building. And in the space between what they'd been and what they were becoming, they found something neither had believed possible: home.